Hey everybody, so I have something kind of exciting today. Today is the launch day of the Panasonic S1 and S1R, and I have one to test out. So I'm gonna be kind of running this through a little bit of its paces and just giving my first impressions on it. Honestly, this is not a review, so let's just go take it out and see what we end up coming with. I wanna thank Horn Photo because you guys have been awesome in letting me test this guy out. So again, thank you Horn Photo, I really appreciate this. This is awesome. So check them out, they're local to Fresno, California, and they got some good people and good knowledge too, so. Okay, so first off, the first thing I wanna say is that I've not been paid. This is a disclaimer. I'm not being paid, I'm not being compensated, I'm not affiliated with Horn Photo or with Panasonic in any way. All of these thoughts are my own, and I just wanna really just test out the camera. I'm just really into tech, and I love it when new gear comes out, especially if it helps to make my job easier, but just in general too, just to see where tech goes. And I think that this camera is kind of cool. I'm just gonna take this camera out and just to test it out and see what I think of it. And because I know that it's appealing to a lot of different people, especially hybrid shooters, wedding shooters, and a bunch of video shooters. So let's go check it out and see what this thing can do. Okay, so before I really dive into my impressions of this camera, I wanna just kind of lay out how I tested this guy out. So I had it for a day. So disclaimer, like this is not a review. I only had it for 24 hours and then I had to take it back to the camera store. So what I did was I took it out around town, downtown as you saw, and I just kind of shot with it how I normally would. I'm pretty quick about shooting photos and then going to video and then switching back and forth between the two whenever I feel like it. And so that switching back and forth between the two is pretty important to me, and that it can be done seamlessly. I know I've mentioned that in other videos before. So I just walked around downtown, just shot some street stuff, shot some cityscapes, I guess you'd call it. And I just wanted to see how responsive it was and if I could just walk around and grab it and go type of deal. The menus obviously are, being that I haven't used Panasonic before, it's a totally different language to me. And I will say that these menus are convoluted. It's just, it was super hard for me to find basic functions that normally I can find pretty quickly just about on any system. And so that was kind of a negative for me, a con. I'm sure that I get used to it eventually in the future, but just know that if you're gonna pick it up for the first time, that you're gonna have a little bit of a learning curve trying to find where everything is at. So like I said, this is kind of a user review, not very technical. I'll put up some quality shots where I was shooting at different frame rates, different qualities, and just so that you guys can see that. But I really wanted to see how did it feel to use? What was it like to actually walk around and just kind of shoot with it? So like I said before, my first impressions of it were the camera is big and it's blocky. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that this is a workhorse camera, meaning that this is going to be this is your workhorse basically. And that you're gonna be using it a lot, you're gonna be using it for commercial gigs. So I think that's what it's built for. It's meant for that, to where you can have it out in inclement weather and not be afraid of it. So I think in that regard, it's there. It's a little bit heavy in my opinion for weddings. I don't know if I'd want two of those on either side of me to shoot a wedding with. And kind of going along that same route, the grip for being such a big camera, it's a good grip. It's not the best. I still stand by the Canon EOS R. That grip has so far been the best grip that I have had in a camera in the last year or so. Granted, bigger cameras like 1DX, like that grip feels great, but that's just a huge camera. So for mirrorless and for also DSLR, I'd put Canon EOS R Then maybe the Panasonic S1 and S1R by extension, then 5D4, very, very close to that, and then the Sony's in there. And also too, just kind of let you guys know, I'm gonna be comparing this naturally just to the EOS R and my experience of the EOS R. It's, like I said, not a total review because I only had the camera for a day, so I can't fully say like, this is what I think for sure, but there are things like grip, like you just know when you pick up the camera that this one, the Canon EOS R, feels better than the Panasonic S1. So sometimes you pick up a camera and you don't find out these little quirks until after you actually start using it. Those are things that in a review, it's super hard to include just because they're usually small details. One of them that I don't think is a smaller detail is the fact that the Panasonic S1 does not have autofocus in high frame rates. So it's shot 150 frames and then 180 frames and no autofocus in either of those high frame rates. So that's something to note. The 1DX2, the Sony's, I know for sure have autofocus in their 120 frames per second. And that's super valuable. I think that is definitely something to weigh your options on which route that you want to go. So just know that going into it. Also, Panasonic has come out saying that they're going to be releasing more features to the camera, V-Log, and then also additional frame rates. I think 10-bit internal is going to be included in that. And that's going to be at an additional price. That's cool in the sense that you're going to get more features outside of just what's been released. But at the same time, how much is it going to cost? I don't think that there's any specifics on how much it's going to cost. Is it going to be $100? Is it going to be $500? So one of the major things that I wanted to test out when I got this camera was the autofocus. Because I know that Lumix, Panasonic, in the past with the GH5, GH5S, they have been, at least I've heard that the autofocus is not the best. And now it's been pretty well publicized that the S1 has contrast detection autofocus, whereas the EOS R and the Sony's have phase detection. So that was something that I wanted to focus on and want to check out. For photo-wise, I have absolutely no qualms for photo-wise in terms of autofocus and just walking around in my experience with it. I didn't get to test super low light, so that's something to just kind of note, but it was pretty dang quick. It was pretty snappy in my experience in terms of autofocus, and it was super accurate. I don't think I had a single missed shot that was out of focus. For video, I will say that it looks good, to be honest with you. The focus racks are pretty nice and smooth in good light. If the object that you're trying to focus on is low contrast, it will struggle. I have a clip where I was just in the camera store and I was trying to focus on this little cup, and it was kind of low contrast, kind of just all one color, and it had a little bit of trouble focusing on that, especially in video. Went back and forth and kind of hunted and then finally found it and then would lock onto it. But that's not something that you want when you're recording video, because how are you going to edit that out? You can't. So that's just something to note that I personally don't know if I would be able to trust the autofocus. Granted, again, I've only had it for a day and I had to return it. So that's just something to know. But in my experience, it wasn't awe-inspiring. It wasn't amazing enough for me to want to immediately switch over from my Canon system to the Lumix system. That kind of dovetails into another topic of who's the camera for, and who is it enough for you to switch over. Personally, just based off of my limited experience with it, I would say if you're Sony, you're A7 III or A7R III owner, then you should stay with your Sony system. As far as I know, they're only releasing an adapter to adapt Canon glass and not Sony glass. I don't even know if that's possible, but you'd have to sell your entire system off and then buy into the S1 and the L mount, buy a whole new set of lenses. And that just, to me, I don't really see the benefit. There's 4K 60, but I don't think that's enough benefit in there to really warrant that kind of switch. For Canon users, my personal experience, not enough for me to want to just jump ship right away. Maybe in the future I'll revisit it, but I'm pretty content with my Canon EOS R system. And this kind of comes down to the whole spec sheet versus reality type of deal, in that on the spec sheet, Canon just gets absolutely blown away by this camera. But in practicality, the usability of Canon is, there's an elegance about it and there's a simplicity about it. Sometimes it's too simple, don't get me wrong, like I'm not totally naive to what Canon does, but at the same time what they do it very well. And it's just easy to use. I might be biased just because I've been using the camera for forever, but it's just super easy to use, super easy to figure out. The learning curve is not something that is a huge learning curve, so just about anybody can pick it up and create something with it. So in the end, it was not enough for me to want to jump ship. I'm curious to see how Canon Glass does with the adapter that's coming out, because I think that could potentially shift things maybe, and more people might want to move from Canon to Panasonic, or at least incorporate the S1 or the S1R into their system. But for me, I'm content right now. So that's kind of the final verdict on that. So I hope that helps. Again, this was just a kind of first impressions of it, not a total review. I just wanted to get my hands on it and see what it felt like. And in the end, it didn't inspire me to want to jump ship, and that's okay. So it may do that for you, it may not, but either way, get your hands on it, try it out, and I hope you guys found that useful. I'll see you guys in the next one.